Do not call the guard, your grace. Penelope Vane, still in her brown housemaid's dress, white cap and apron, caught Cassius's hand above the bell pull as two familiar pairs of boots changed pace beyond the stone arch. Beneath one cuff she had seen Baron Foxcroft's amber ribbon. Cassius had already ordered Foxcroft's carriage turned from the gate, and as the wheels ground backward over wet gravel, the watchman behind them turned too. Penelope narrowed the lantern, seized the Duke of Carrowmore by the sleeve, and pulled him toward the linen stair. "You have just closed the door I meant them to watch," she whispered, opening a low oak panel. "This way." For one breath he stood like a man unused to following anyone. Then the boots struck the flags behind them. Cassius stepped through. Penelope latched the panel. Darkness swallowed them. She knew it by touch, 4 steps down, left at the cold seam beneath the laundry grate. Cassius followed without demanding an explanation. "They will search the west gallery first," she murmured. "I shall dismiss the entire night watch before dawn. That tells Foxcroft exactly whom you recognized. The 2 we saw are exposed, others are not. Send everyone away and you lose them." He stopped close behind her. "You know there are others I know who carries messages off his errand, which carriage passes appear out of order, and who suddenly avoids the steward's eye. I do not yet know which of those things are treachery." A door thudded above. "Where does this end, the old stable court?" "Lead." They reached the iron-bound door before the search found the linen stair. Penelope lifted the latch, and horse-breath wet gravel and cold night air met them. The understeward stared when they emerged from a blind wall. Cassius crossed the yard. "Ashby, shut the outer gates. No carriage leaves without my word. The 2 men from the West Watch are off duty." "Not the other 3, Penelope said. Cassius turned. "There are 3 people I need left exactly where they are. Do not question them. Do not dismiss them. If they think themselves safe, they may show us where Foxcroft's orders enter the house. You are asking me to leave doubtful people in my household. I am asking you to hold the gates while I watch the people." His gaze went once to the yard doors. 3 names. She gave them. Cassius looked to Ashby. "The 2 exposed watchmen are dismissed at first light, quietly. The other 3 remain untouched. Miss Vane will tell you if that changes. The order set a limit around her work instead of crushing it." Before breakfast, Cassius added, "Prove it." Penelope lifted the lantern. "Gladly, your grace." The test came sooner than either of them expected. The next morning, Cassius stood in the shadow of the secondary pantry passage, while Penelope crossed the kitchen doorway with a list of linen counts in her hand. One of the 3 names, a junior footman who had lately found too many excuses to visit the stable yard, sat at the servants' table with a cup before him. Penelope did not question him. She asked the cook loudly enough to carry whether every carriage pass would need replacing, now that the ducal crest was being struck in a different position. The footman's cup clicked against its saucer. He bent at once toward a scullery maid. "Did she say the crest will fall to the left of the fold or the right?" Penelope walked on. She did not look back until she had reached Cassius. "He has not seen today's issue," she said. "Last night's pass bore genuine Carrowmore wax, but it was used out of sequence. Someone with access to the seal is feeding Foxcroft true passes at the wrong time. That man only knows the old instruction." Cassius watched the footman through the doorway. "You asked him nothing. People prepare lies for questions. Panic is less prepared." For a moment his expression did not change. Then he called Ashby forward. "No person connected with the suspected pass chain is to be dismissed until Miss Vane has spoken with you," Cassius said. "The gate is my concern. She decides when those names are disturbed." Penelope felt the weight of the order more sharply than praise would have struck her. A duke had not merely thanked a maid for opening a hidden door. He had attached consequence to what she knew. Foxcroft's carriage had been turned away, but the great house party at Carrowmore could not be turned away with it. Invitations had gone out weeks before. County families were already on the road. To cancel now would make Cassius look frightened, and hand Foxcroft the very story he wanted. So the first week became a contest over how to keep a house open without making it blind. They argued late one afternoon in the winter garden, while servants moved chairs among orange trees and wintering ferns. A gentleman loosely connected to Foxcroft was expected the following day. Cassius wanted him confined to the public rooms. No private corridor, no library, no west stair, he said, tapping the guest list with one finger. If he crosses any of those lines, a footman redirects him. If you make the line visible, he will spend the evening studying it. Penelope replied. She shifted 2 place cards on a silver tray. Let him think no one minds where he walks. Cassius gave her a level look. And when he reaches my correspondence, he will not. Put the dowager from Ripon beside him. She detests a draught, and will complain if a door remains open long enough to chill her. Give him the blue guest room. He must pass the steward's office to reach it. He will feel free while half the house sees him. Cassius looked from the cards to the winter garden doors. 1 footman at the end of the blue passage. 1 footman, Penelope agreed. 2 evenings later, the gentleman, certain he had been treated as an ordinary guest, became careless over tea. Penelope was changing a tray near the hearth when he told another man that Foxcroft would not bring his own carriage to the neighboring ball, but borrow one from a cousin so that no Carrowmore groom could mark his arrival. When Penelope reported it in Cassius's study, he stood with both hands on the desk and listened to the end without interrupting. Your method worked, he said. As did yours. He tried the blue passage last night. Cassius's eyebrows rose. Your footman asked whether he required help finding his room. He retreated before reaching the steward's door. So neither of us gets the pleasure of being entirely right. Penelope folded her hands to hide a smile. A severe disappointment, Your Grace. He almost smiled back. That was worse. By the second week, the house was full. Silk whispered across polished floors, carriage wheels rolled through the forecourt from noon until dusk, and the servants' bells seemed never to stop. Yet Penelope discovered that she looked forward to the moments when Cassius appeared, with a complaint about one of her arrangements. The long dining gallery gave them their finest quarrel. Penelope had ordered the great silver candelabra shifted enough to break the table into smaller conversation groups. Symmetry is preferable, Cassius said from the head of the table. The footman can see every glass. Symmetry makes the room look like a tribunal. It gives clear paths to the doors. If you arrange 30 people as though you expect them to flee, they will wonder what you know that they do not. Cassius paced the spaces between chairs, then stopped beside the south door. Move this chair 6 inches. Your conversation group survives, and so does the exit. Penelope considered it. Agreed. His glance sharpened, as if easy victory made him suspicious. She turned to the footman. Wine service from the west. 2 young men stepped forward together, each more aware of the Duke than of the other. Their shoulders struck. A tray rang against a chair. The decanter tipped and was caught. The gallery froze. Penelope raised one eyebrow. Behold, Your Grace, the flawless protection offered by a clear line of sight. Cassius laughed, a short, unwilling sound. At the open gallery door, the dubious gentleman from the blue suite paused. His eyes moved from Cassius to Penelope, then to the servants who were trying not to stare. Cassius saw him too. His amusement vanished first. Reset, he told the footman, and watch each other rather than me. Then to Penelope, without lowering his voice. Keep your candelabra. The arrangement is yours. The gentleman moved on. By supper, 2 guests had somehow learned that the Duke had yielded his dining room to a housemaid. Penelope heard the phrase while directing a tray through the antechamber. It was not yet scandal. It was merely the sort of observation from which scandal liked to grow. Cassius found her there several minutes later. I can remove you from guest-facing work until the party ends, he said, and confirm that there is something to hide. His mouth tightened. No. Then we let them wonder. Wonder is less dangerous than an answer Foxcroft can use. He accepted that, though she could see he disliked it. The incident changed the pleasure of their rivalry, without destroying it. Penelope still enjoyed proving him wrong. She simply knew now that every visible concession he made to her had a cost outside the room. In the third week, Cassius proposed testing carriage access at the main gate. His first plan involved visible inspection of every seal. Penelope rejected it before he finished the sentence. "Half your guests will believe you suspect them," she said. "Standing with him in the upper gallery overlooking the court. The other half will decide you are afraid. And your plan? You manage it." He looked at her. "The stable yard, the gate rotation, the grooms, all of it. I shall stay here and watch who becomes interested when a carriage is redirected. You will not check my arrangements. If I do, there is little point in giving them to you." The admission cost her more than she allowed her face to show. An hour later, an unfamiliar carriage carrying an old Carrowmore mark turned into the wrong court. No guard shouted. No guest was stopped. A groom simply stepped forward, bowed, and directed the driver toward the outer lane, while another groom checked the pass beyond sight of the drawing-room windows. Penelope watched the carriage leave. Near the window below, one guest paused with his teacup halfway to his mouth until the wheels had cleared the arch, then sent his valet toward the service stair. She marked the reaction and did not move from her place. That was the test she had set herself. As much as Cassius trust his yard, keep her eyes on her own room. He joined her several minutes later. "Well," he asked. "The carriage never reached the inner doors. You sound disappointed. I dislike admitting when your method is elegant. Do not make a habit of it. I had no intention of doing so." His shoulder was close enough to hers that she could feel warmth through the cool gallery air, but he did not crowd her toward the window or claim the small success. He merely stood there with her until the next carriage arrived. By the fourth week, fatigue made the house less dignified. A new footman misread the third-floor bell late one night and sent hot water to the wrong guest. By morning, Penelope was alone in the small breakfast room, trying to repair the day's service list before the family came down. Cassius entered, expecting the steward. Penelope began to rise. "Sit, Miss Vane." He pulled out the chair opposite her. The third-floor bell was misread. "I shall have the bell wire checked. It was not the wire. It was the boy." She rubbed the place between her brows. "And if you loom over him with that expression, he will drop the first teapot he touches." Cassius paused halfway to standing again. "Sit," Penelope said. He sat. The absurdity of having told a duke to sit in his own breakfast room nearly made her laugh, but she was too tired. Cassius drew the service list toward him. "Have you eaten?" "No." He took a clean plate from the sideboard, set a warm roll on it, and slid it across the table. No flourish, no insistence that she be grateful. He simply returned to the list and asked which bell had been mistaken. Penelope ate while they worked. At some point, the conversation wandered from bells to how quickly rumor traveled through a large house. "Faster than an order," Penelope said. "Nothing travels faster than an order. An order stops at the person who dislikes it. Gossip improves with every landing." "Then I have been commanding the wrong force." She laughed softly. The room was pale with early light. Somewhere beyond the door, a maid rattled coal into a scuttle. For 10 minutes, Foxcroft did not exist. There were only lists, warm bread, a stubborn duke, and the dangerous comfort of being known in ordinary hours. Penelope wanted another morning like it. That frightened her more than the hidden passage had. Her purpose at Carrowmore had always been plain: earn wages, leave with an unimpeachable reference, and choose her next household herself. Affection for a duke could turn independence into dependence with frightening ease, especially if gratitude and employment became tangled together. So in the 5th week, when she devised the boldest test yet, she told Cassius most of it, but not all. She meant to let a harmless false report about the alliance dinner travel through one of the 3 watched contacts. Foxcroft would either ignore it or send word through the route he trusted. Cassius disliked the idea immediately. You want a lie moving under my roof, a harmless one. No guest is accused, no servant is placed in danger. It concerns only the order in which 2 county gentlemen will arrive. How long? 2 days. Cassius considered. 2 days. If any servant is threatened, it ends. Agreed. What Penelope did not tell him was that she had allowed one contact to believe Cassius himself had chosen the false arrival order. If Foxcroft reacted to that detail, she would know how close his informant stood to the Duke's apparent commands. The bait moved quickly. By the second afternoon, a message had gone from the service wing to a guest who had seemed neutral, and from that guest toward Foxcroft. Penelope had her route. She returned from the upper floor carrying the afternoon post and heard carriage wheels in the front court. Not arriving. Leaving. She stopped in the passage. A dismissed kitchen servant hurried past with his coat over one arm and would not meet her eye. Penelope went cold. She reached Cassius's study to find his secretary at the desk, Ashby by the door, and 3 guest names already crossed from the household list. This entire chain is compromised, Cassius said. 1 carriage has gone. The other 2 are being brought round. The junior footman is dismissed with a month's wages. Stop them. Cassius looked up. You found the leak. I am closing it. You are announcing to Foxcroft exactly which route we found. I will not keep known spies under my roof 3 days before the neighboring ball. They are not all spies. Some are only people through whom information passes. Penelope set the post down too hard. One of those departures was the only person who could tell us which witness Foxcroft means to use. Cassius came around the desk. Then why did I not know that? Because she had expected this. Because she had wanted enough knowledge to protect the plan from the very man whose house it concerned. The answer tasted poor before she spoke it. I did not tell you the whole of the bait. His face went still. How much did you leave out? I let one contact believe the false order came directly from you. You used my command as part of the lure without telling me. Yes. And then expected me to distinguish from half a plan which doubtful people you wished me to preserve. Penelope held his gaze. Yes. The second carriage rolled beneath the study windows. That is the cost of it, she said. Your order has damaged the chain. My half-truth made it possible for you to do so. If we continue in the same fashion, Foxcroft need only wait for us to defeat each other. Cassius looked toward the window, then to the crossed names. His anger did not vanish. Neither did hers. Miss Vane, he said at last, which names must remain? She told him. Cassius turned to Ashby. Stop the other carriages if they have not passed the outer gate. The remaining names stay. Their access is Miss Vane's decision until after the ball. The first departures were my order. The mistake was mine. Ashby bowed and left at once. The secretary hesitated. Cassius added, Write the correction under my name, not hers. When the room was empty, Penelope drew a blank sheet toward herself. My mistake is here. She dipped the pen. I gave you half the plan because half left me an advantage. It also left you blind. She drew the route from kitchen to stable-yard, from stable-yard to the neutral guest from the guest toward Foxcroft. Then she marked the detail she had used in Cassius's name and the 2 contacts they had just lost. With every line she felt more exposed. The map was not merely information. It was the method by which she had kept powerful people from ever holding the whole of her thinking. Once Cassius saw it, he would know where she had guessed whom she trusted, and which doors she had kept in reserve. For one sharp instant, she regretted giving him so much. Cassius did not reach for the paper. He did not ask for the names behind every mark. He read only what she had chosen to put before him. He let the silence hold for a moment. I do not require an advantage over you, he said. The restraint mattered more than if he had promised never to use what he knew. I know that now. Do you? Penelope looked at the ruined portion of the chain. Enough to show you the part that makes me look clever, and the part that makes me look foolish. The corner of his mouth moved, but there was no amusement in it. A costly proof. For both of us. He laid one finger beside the route she had drawn, not over it. Then we use what remains. The evening before the neighbouring ball, they met in the old stable court where their arrangement had begun. Foxcroft had failed to gain quiet access to Carrowmore. Now he meant to use the servants' passage itself against them. Word had reached Penelope through the thinned chain that he intended to describe the first night as a clandestine meetings, a maid luring a duke into darkness, then persuading him to dismiss loyal watchmen who might expose her ambition. On another man's estate, Cassius could not order the whole room emptied, and Penelope could not know every servant's loyalty. "I can secure our carriage," Cassius said. "I can place my own men in the outer hall and make certain none of Foxcroft's men approaches the Carrowmore party armed. Beyond that, the house is not mine. It is enough." Ashby had offered Penelope a second groom to watch the inner passage. She had refused. If she gave Cassius the door, she would not secretly keep another hand on the latch. Cassius watched her. "How shall I know when you want me to act?" Penelope took a spare Carrowmore carriage pass from her apron pocket. The ducal wax caught the last light of the yard. "When I need the room made safe, I shall put this face down on a table," she said. "Not before. And if Foxcroft insults you before then, he will. If he insults me, he certainly will." Cassius exhaled through his nose. "You find this reassuring. I find predictable men easier to arrange." His dry glance warmed her more than it should have. Then he asked, and after tomorrow, the question removed every other person from the yard without moving a soul. Penelope could have answered with another plan. Instead, she gave him the truth she usually saved, until truth became useful. "I want my wages and my reference to remain mine. Whether I stay in Yorkshire or leave it," she said. "I want to be seen without becoming dependent upon being seen by you." Cassius did not reach for her. "Your wages and your reference are not mine to bargain with. They are yours whether you ever speak to me after tomorrow or not." She believed him because 5 weeks earlier she would not have. "I cannot order the county to approve of you," he continued. "I can decide what happens under my name, and I can wait until you decide what you want done with yours." Penelope turned the carriage pass between her fingers, then put it away. "Tomorrow," she said. "Wait for the card." "I shall." The neighbouring ball glittered with too much candlelight, and too many people pretending not to watch one another. Penelope attended as an upper servant attached to the Carrowmore ladies' rooms. The work kept her between the cloak chamber and the ballroom doors, close enough to hear names announced, and far enough from the centre that most guests looked through her, until Foxcroft made certain they did not. Just before supper, he took a place near several neutral county families and began to speak in a voice pitched for accidental hearing. The 2 watchmen dismissed from Carrowmore after the first night now wore Foxcroft livery. One stood at each edge of his little audience. Foxcroft did not accuse Penelope with vulgarity. He was too practiced for that. He regretted, he said, that a respectable household had been disturbed by the ambitions of a servant. He regretted that 2 loyal men had lost their places after witnessing a maid lead the Duke into a private passage. He regretted that political judgment had been clouded by a clandestine attachment. The word attachment moved faster than any order Cassius had ever given. Faces turned toward Penelope in the doorway. For an instant, she felt the old instinct to manage all of them at once, to answer the dowager, reassure the young wife beside her, guess which gentleman would repeat the tale in the supper-room, make herself harmless enough that the room would tire of looking. She did none of it. Cassius stood near the outer arch. One gloved hand rested behind his back. The other was closed at his side. He did not cross the floor. Penelope went to the first former watchman. "I beg your pardon," she said, with the mildness of a servant correcting a household detail. "Was it before or after the gate whistle that you say you saw His Grace enter the linen stair?" The man glanced toward Foxcroft. "Before. 10 o'clock near enough." The Baron's carriage had not yet been turned away. "Thank you." Penelope moved on before he could improve the answer. The second watchman had found a minor squire willing to listen. Penelope stopped at a respectful distance. "And you, sir, was the Baron's carriage already gone when you saw me in the West Gallery gone?" "Yes. 9:45, perhaps. You were hurrying toward the Duke." The squire frowned. 9:45. The first watchman, hearing him, said too quickly. "No, it was after 10. A gentleman beside the squire turned his head. "Your fellow has just placed the maid at the linen stair at 10, before the carriage was turned away." The second watchman flushed. "Then I have mistaken the quarter." Penelope let the correction hang. She crossed to a lady's maid she had kept within the circle after Cassius's disastrous dismissals. The woman had attended her mistress on the drive to Carrowmore that first night, and had waited near the gate vestibule while the road cleared. "You were at Carrowmore before 10 that evening, were you not?" Penelope asked. "I was." Baron Foxcroft's carriage came up while ours was still waiting. His was turned back before the stable clock struck 10. Several heads turned toward the former watchman. Penelope said nothing more. That was the useful part of silence. Once a room began asking its own questions, no servant needed to lead it by the nose. Foxcroft saw the shift. "A confusion of minutes proves nothing," he said. "The Duke dismissed these men because they knew too much." "No," Cassius said from the archway. "One word, no defense of Penelope, no speech." Foxcroft's mouth tightened. He lifted 2 fingers toward the hall. 3 of his retainers moved forward from beyond the ballroom doors. Their coats hung heavily enough to show what they carried beneath them. Penelope took the Carrowmore pass from her glove, crossed to the nearest side table, and laid it face down. Cassius moved at once. He did not come to Penelope. He went to the door. His own retainers closed beside him, and he addressed their host, rather than pretend the neighboring house belonged to him. "Those men are armed." The host's steward stepped to the threshold. Cassius's men held their place with him. "No armed servant approaches the Carrowmore party," Cassius said. Then to Foxcroft, "Foxcroft, your quarrel with me may remain a quarrel of words. If you require men with pistols to support it, they remain outside." Foxcroft's face hardened. "And this is not the use of rank to silence an inconvenient truth." Cassius looked at him. "Carrowmore will give you no introductions funds, carriage access, or private support after tonight. That is the use of my rank. Miss Vane's truth is hers." The cost of the words moved visibly through the room. Men who had expected Cassius to preserve the county alliance glanced at one another. Foxcroft had wanted to make Penelope the price of political peace. Cassius had refused the bargain without making her his possession. The room looked back to her. Penelope stood with empty hands. She did not need the carriage pass now. She did not need Cassius to certify her character as though his title could manufacture virtue. "A maid knows the hidden ways of a great house," she said, "because the house depends upon people whom guests are trained not to see. We know which bell rang, which carriage arrived first, which footman carried a message that was not his errand, and which man wears another household's ribbon beneath his cuff." The first former watchman looked down at his sleeve as if the ribbon might still be there. A murmur went through the listeners. Penelope continued, "I saw 2 men of Carrowmore's watch answer Baron Foxcroft's sign. I stopped his grace from calling them. I led him by a route they did not know. The Baron's carriage had already been turned away before the hour his witnesses now require. You have heard them place the same event in 2 orders and 2 places. I have nothing to add to their confusion. No one applauded. Penelope was grateful for that. A neutral gentleman asked the lady's maid to repeat the carriage time. Another asked the first watchman whether he had said before or after the whistle. The man gave a third answer, and knew as soon as he heard himself that it was worse than the first two. Foxcroft looked around the circle that had been meant to belong to him. It no longer did. He turned on his heel and left. His retainers went with him. Cassius's men did not touch them. The orchestra, which had faltered into an uncertain silence, began again with the sharp, hesitant scrape of a single violin before the others joined in. Penelope stood very still for one breath. Then a dowager who had spent half the evening pretending not to notice servants handed her an abandoned cloak and said, "With pointed normality, Miss Vane, I believe this belongs to Lady Mercer." It was not an apology. It was something Penelope trusted more the room continuing after it had been forced to see her. She took the cloak. "Thank you, ma'am." An hour later, the Carrowmore carriage rolled north through the dark. Cassius sat opposite her, one boot braced against the sway. For several miles, neither of them spoke. Penelope watched the lamps throw brief gold across his face and vanish again. The victory should have made the future simple. Instead, simplicity frightened her. A duke could offer protection so complete that a woman ceased to notice the doors closing around her. Carrowmore could become a gilded version of the servants' passage, safe, warm, and chosen for her by someone else. For one sharp moment, Penelope thought of leaving simply to prove that she still could. Cassius seemed to read the distance in her face, though not its reason. He reached inside his coat and drew out a folded paper sealed with Carrowmore wax. He did not open it. "Your reference," he said. "Signed before we left this afternoon." Penelope looked at the seal, but did not take the paper yet. "It states your service, your responsibilities, and that you leave Carrowmore in good standing," he continued. "There is no condition attached to it. Ashby has the copy for the household books. This one is yours. You prepared it before the ball." "Yes. You were very certain we would survive it. I was certain you should not have to win it in order to be free to go." Only then did Penelope take the reference. Its weight was almost nothing. Its meaning was not. Cassius had placed the proof of her independence in her hands before asking for anything that might follow it. He had made leaving possible before speaking of staying. "Where do you want to go?" he asked. The old instinct offered 3 safe answers, each designed to preserve leverage. Penelope let them pass. She set the sealed reference beside her on the seat. Then she reached across the small space and took his hand first. "I want to stay in Yorkshire," she said. "Near you, but not in your household as a maid." His fingers closed around hers, careful and firm. "Never as my maid." She waited. Cassius added, "Your last day of service is yours to choose. After it, if you still wish it, I shall court you openly." Penelope's mouth curved. "Of course you would put courtship on a schedule. Only the beginning. And after that, I have been advised that you object to men arranging every room before you enter it." She laughed then, quietly, with the sealed reference at her side, the road unspooling beyond the windows, and no footsteps pursuing them through the dark. By the next season, Penelope had been out of Carrowmore's service for months. Her wages had been paid in full, her reference had secured her standing wherever she might have chosen to work, and Cassius had courted her in daylight rather than in hidden passages. Their engagement had not erased the gossip. It had merely ceased to let gossip decide the terms of her life. On a bright autumn afternoon, the Carrowmore carriage drew into the crowded court of the largest county assembly of the season. A groom took the Carrowmore pass, glanced at the familiar wax, and tucked it away without a second thought. Cassius stepped down first. He gave the driver one brief instruction about the horses, then turned to the carriage door. Penelope descended in a deep blue gown. She could feel eyes finding her before both feet reached the stones. Some belonged to people who had defended her after the ball. Some belonged to people who still thought a duke ought to have chosen more conveniently. Ahead of them, the manor offered 2 entrances. The side door stood open beneath a covered passage, quiet and nearly empty. It was the sensible route for anyone who wished to arrive without becoming an event. The main entrance blazed with candles beyond tall glass panes. Carriages queued before it. County families climbed the broad steps beneath the eyes of half Yorkshire. Cassius studied the 2 doors, then looked at Penelope. The side entrance would be faster, he said. There was the old challenge in it. Penelope looked once at the quiet passage. Months earlier, she would have measured its turns, its servants' stares, the people who could use it without being noticed. She still could. Loving Cassius had not made her less alert, less ambitious, or less capable of seeing the room before she entered it. It had only given her another thing she was free to choose. She nodded toward the broad steps. Cassius offered his arm only then. Penelope placed her hand on it. Speed was never the only form of good strategy, Cassius. No, he said. You have been very persistent on that point. Together they turned away from the hidden door. Penelope raised her chin, read the waiting crowd once, and chose the main entrance. The end.